blessed. My favorite city. I love London.
NFL Game Day in London.
From Wembley Stadium in London, England.
West Coast teams like the Los Angeles Rams must travel all their players, personnel, and equipment and supplies over 5,000 miles just to play in a regular season game in London. The challenges of such a voyage must be met with a large-scale effort by key staffers in the organization to set the team up for success overseas. Several months prior to game day in London, a shipping container is filled to the brim and shipped with several tons of supplies and equipment, including nutrition and hydration items, medical supplies, practice equipment, generators for electricity, and an assortment of dry goods and condiments.
Setting up the team with international travel, some of the planning begins almost a year in advance. We have to work as a team to be able to make this transition so seamless. What we try and do is make sure athletes and coaches and players, they don't feel the transition because we take care of that ahead of time.
I think with international travel, it's the small things you don't think about what you need. It's the Band-Aids, it's the wound care stuff, and you have these alcohols, these peroxides, these antibiotics, and international travel, they say, hey, you can't bring this, and this because it's a flammable or hazardous material. So you can't fly it on a plane, so you have to send this stuff on a boat. Our medical team, we're a walking hospital. Everywhere we go, we are a pop-up medical team. About 900 items and about 100 big pieces of equipment ready for any injury. So what we did 5 months ago was we prepped a whole allotment of things, of supplies that gets on an ocean freight container and shows up hopefully 5 months later when you land and touch down on a Friday in London for a game on Sunday.
9 days before the London game, an additional 25,000 pounds of cargo is flown overseas, including practice equipment, IT and audiovisual gear, and 63 player bags carrying helmets, pads, jerseys, and cleats.
Because of international protocol, you have to list each item, its serial number, its value, and all those things, just to clear customs.
Equipment is one thing, but NFL players require a little more care when handling. One major challenge for any NFL team traveling to London is jet lag. For West Coast teams like the Los Angeles Rams, the journey means adapting to an 8-hour time difference.
Throughout the week, we'll progressively try to manage our time frame of our daily regimen with our practice and everything, slowly manipulating that time back a little bit to get a little bit closer to UK time.
Part of your body clock is obviously when we want to feed it. So our fueling strategies will change as we try to slowly progress into that local time zone.
The biggest thing from a nutrition side is probably hydration up front. We know the limits that can come from being dehydrated in performance, so we definitely encourage guys to weigh in, then weigh out accordingly after practice.
Here we go, man, let's go. Speed, 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 good stride.
Then we can kind of go in and give them a more exact calculation from an electrolyte supplementation standpoint or just an overall quantity of liquid. We want those guys to be back at a range that they're really comfortable with and that we feel like sets them up for success.
When we look at the scheduling, we're going to play around with how hard we're going to train our guys leading into that flight, because what we don't want to do is inhibit too much of their recovery process by creating too much metabolic damage with a big practice or a big lift session that takes them to a point where they can't recover on a flight.
We realize that this travel is pretty taxing on the guys already. We really want to almost overemphasize the use of antioxidants. We may sneak in a few more berries during this period of time and then encourage guys from a probiotic standpoint. So, we'll encourage guys to use yogurt and those types of things. Immune system health is huge for us here.
Using the NFL schedule to their advantage, the Rams begin their international journey with a pit stop in Atlanta, where they play the Atlanta Falcons exactly 1 week before their game in London. This allows the team to split the long journey into 2 shorter legs, and it gives the players more time to adapt to the time difference they will face in London.
will land about 11:30 to midnight East Coast time. So right when we get there, we want to get them right to bed. Then we want to get them up and get them on the East Coast schedule right away.
We want your body clock as an athlete, as a professional football player, to be shifted appropriately to wherever we're going to play locally. We're basically losing a night. Once we leave on Thursday, we're going to arrive there on Friday. So in this case, we'll start to lead in. We'll push our schedule back to bank sleep because the benefits of sleep far outweigh most of the other things that we'll do from a performance standpoint. Realistically, it's hard to sleep on a flight that's going international. It's hard to maintain quality sleep.
Our number one goal, obviously, is for them to get to London and feel as organic as possible like they're in LA. It's all about decreasing jet lag. Okay, as we all know, when you travel across time zones, your clock naturally is on a rhythm of where you live at. And so circadian rhythm is basically that rhythm that your body kind of knows when it's time to go to sleep and when it's naturally time to get up. And that's how we live every day. And we know if jet lag and sleep deprivation then becomes a decrease in performance. And we can't afford to do that.
3rd and inches, Goff rolling, looking, cutting back, touchdown.
And they're off to London with a 37-10 victory over the Atlanta Falcons.
After spending a few extra days in Atlanta to rest and begin adjusting sleep schedules, the team flies the remaining 4,204 miles on an 8-hour flight to London.
Thursday evening, we'll fly through the night to fly to London. We get to London, it's pretty much daytime, early morning time.
Once landed and now occupying 180 hotel rooms, the team's battle against shifting time zones and body rhythms continues.
One of the first things that we will do once we arrive at our hotels, we won't even check into our rooms. We're going to drop our bags. We're going to do an activation workout.
15 yards. Ready. Go.
So that we can, number one, activate tissue, get out of the seated position that we've been in. We're going to try to get that athlete's body back to being ready for football because fast forward, we're going to have football practice in a matter of a couple of hours. So that process starts immediately with feet on the ground.
And get these guys moving right away. Keep them on schedule by having meetings, having meals. We don't want to get to the rooms. We don't want them taking naps. We want them to stay up throughout the day so they can go to bed on that normal time on that Friday night.
In their travels, teams have learned that the toughest opponent in any cultural divide is taste buds.
Our biggest obstacle usually is the food and making sure that it's most what they're used to. That's what we've learned is try to stay Americanized as long as possible so their comforts are met.
It's working with their chefs and at the hotel, trying to make sure that, how the foods are prepared and all those things are, very similar to what we would do in Los Angeles. In dealing with the hotels there, we're obviously pretty in tune with where they're getting their food from. It's coordinating with them, and there's obviously some things that we're not going to set them up for failure with. We're not going to ask them to have a bunch of avocados laying around, just knowing that that's not going to be either something they can even get or that it's going to be up to our quality. So some of that stuff, we kind of eliminate on the front end and make it easy for them. So it's just some of those finer details, the lingo that we may use that we don't realize they're not accustomed to, and it's just talking through those things. Oddly enough, even things like, turkey and cheese sandwiches, they might interpret that as plain turkey and plain cheese sandwiches. So it's things like that that you just have to be really specific on and just make sure that everything's, kind of tied down.
The second largest obstacle when staying away from home, sleep.
When taking an NFL team on the road, there's a lot of processes that take place so that we can make them comfortable in a sleep setting. Our operations team will go into the hotels and set the temperatures at a desired temperature for us, which is actually 68 degrees Fahrenheit. Then she will actually give them suggested markers, as in shut your phone off, turn it to vibrate. We will send out a wake-up call for the following morning if anyone's worried about alarm clocks on their cell phones and things like that. We'll try to mitigate those risks of an early wake-up because someone's sending you a text message from the opposite coast. Then we'll actually move into darkening the shades as much as possible, and then we're going to try to reduce ambient lighting or noise. So all those steps take place way, way, way in advance through our operations team and through meetings with our performance department where we can actually start to look at what's most impactful, how can we get them into an ideal situation to get really adequate sleep for this trip.
London, we here, huh? Woo!
So what does it all add up to? The year of planning, the hours of manpower, the thousands of pounds of equipment, and the commitment to prime physical conditioning?
Enabling guys not to have to overcome an unnecessary obstacle during the game. Nutrition is never going to win or lose us a football game, but it can create an obstacle that a guy doesn't necessarily need to have to overcome during the game to perform at his best. So if he's adequately hydrated, if he's fueled the way that he fuels on a weekly basis, then at that point, my job's essentially done.
As long as our players feel good, they will perform good, and we're confident in that. So we're trying to take care of all the precautionary steps that we possibly can.
Touchdown, LA!
To put them in the best situation possible so that we can maximize performance in London at 5 o'clock p.m. when we face off against the Cincinnati Bengals.
What's successful for us is when we win the game to come home. If everything goes according to plan, logistically as far as timing and not being a distraction to the coaches or players, that's the goal. But there's nothing like winning the game and coming home on an 11-hour flight, in a good mood.
They just do this great. You have to travel, and you still have to come out here and win like this in London.
Yo, it's got to win in London, baby. You know I love this city, man. It's my favorite city. Shout out to the UK. I'm moving over here after I retire, baby. Shout out to London fans. I appreciate y'all here with.